I'm calling this video, the Sabbath Cover Up, because in it your eyes will be opened to one of Satan's greatest deceptions. Before we start, I want to give a little history of the 7-day Sabbath. God created everything in 6 days, but He didn't stop there. He continued on to make a 7th day in which He blessed and declared holy. Exodus 20 verse 11, For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then He rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. The 7th day is a blessed and holy day because it's the cap of creation. It testifies of creation and God as being the Creator. Because of this, God declares the 7th day a Sabbath. The word Sabbath means to rest, or to take the day off from work, because the day is holy. We do the same thing with holidays such as Thanksgiving or the 4th of July. We take these days off from work because they are a memorial of something special. Memorials are like a bookmarker in time, so they can't be changed. When something is holy, it means it's special to God. The holy and blessed things of God are important because He uses them to make us holy, just as He is holy. Leviticus 11 verse 44, I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. Do not make yourselves unclean by any creature that moves along the ground. This command to be holy, as God is holy, is repeated again in the New Covenant. 1 Peter 1 verses 15 to 16, But just as He who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do, for it is written, Be holy, because I am holy. Holiness is very important, so we have to work at it, because without holiness, we will not see the Lord. Hebrews 12 verse 14, Work at living in peace with everyone, and work at living a holy life, for those who are not holy will not see the Lord. When we make the holy things of God part of our lives, we become holy, just as He is holy. This includes keeping the Sabbath holy. Ezekiel 20 verse 12, I also gave them my Sabbath to be a sign between me and them, to show that it is I, the Lord, who makes them holy. When we keep the Sabbath holy, we are declaring to the world that the God of creation is our God. Ezekiel 20 verse 20, Keep my Sabbaths holy. Let them be a sign between me and you, so that they may know that I am the Lord your God. The 7th day Sabbath is holy time, dedicated to the Lord as His appointed time to gather for worship. Leviticus 23 verse 3, You have 6 days in which to do your work, but remember the 7th day Sabbath. On that day do not work, but gather for worship. The Sabbath belongs to the Lord, no matter where you live. Obeying God by keeping the Sabbath holy and gathering for worship is one of many ways we can express true worship and our love for God. And Satan hates that. Satan hates it when people worship the one true God because he wants our worship. Satan is jealous for our worship because he wants to be like the Most High God. Isaiah 14 verses 12 to 14, How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations! For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. Satan even tried to get Jesus to worship Him. Matthew 4 verses 8 to 9, again, the devil took Jesus up on an exceedingly high mountain, and showed Him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And He said to him, All these things I will give you if you bow down and worship me. Worship is very important to God, because how we worship determines who we worship and how we live. Worship affects every aspect of our life. Worshipping the one true God who created all things is the goal of the everlasting gospel and will be the foundation of the final judgment of the world. Revelation 14 verses 6 to 7, Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water. In order for Satan to receive worship, he must divert worship away from God. He does this by changing what God has said. Satan knows how true and acceptable worship is based on obeying God over anyone else. Matthew 15 verse 9, their worship is worthless, for they teach their man-made laws instead of those from God. Mark 7 verse 7, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. Satan knows that God does not want his people worshiping him like the pagan nations worship their false gods. Deuteronomy 12 verses 29 to 31. When the Lord your God goes ahead of you and destroys the nations and you drive them out and live in their land, do not fall into the trap of following their customs and worshiping their gods. Do not inquire about their gods, saying, how do these nations worship their gods? I want to follow their example. You must not worship the Lord your God the way the other nations worship their gods, for they perform for their gods every detestable act that the Lord hates. Satan, and his lust to be worshipped, created a system of false worship. He created this system and put a man over it who changed God's times and law. Daniel 7 verse 25, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and will intend to change appointed times and law. 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3 to 4, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. It's Satan who is giving this man his throne, his power and great authority. Revelation 13 verse 2, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. When we worship the beast, it's Satan who is actually receiving the worship because it's his system. Revelation 13 verse 4, so they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Satan is using his system to make changes to what God has said, and by doing this, he is drawing worship away from God to himself, and in the process the whole world is being deceived. Revelation 12 verse 9, so the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. 1 John 5 verse 19, we know that we are of God, and the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. In this video we will only be looking at the seventh-day Sabbath because this is one of the times that Satan changed. In order for Satan to make these changes, he has to change what God has said. He does this by tweaking and adding words to the Bible, for example the word Easter. Easter is a pagan holiday that has its root in Babylonian sun worship. The word Easter, which comes from the Anglo-Saxon, is a term derived from the pagan goddess of the dawn. The Catholic Encyclopedia, 1987, page 177. In order for Satan to get people to celebrate Easter, in place of one of God's appointed times he removed the word Passover from the Bible and replaced it with the word Easter. Passover is one of God's appointed times, Easter is not. Acts 12 verse 4, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. The King James Version. The word that should be there is Passover. Acts 12 verse 4, so when he had arrested him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him before the people after Passover. The New King James Version. Now that we know one of Satan's methods of changing God's times and law, let's see what he did to change God's seventh-day Sabbath. The seventh day is Saturday, not Sunday. Sunday is the first day of the week. Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. Saturday, the seventh day of the week. The day preceding Sunday and following Friday. Sunday, the first day of the week. The Sabbath is holy, so God told us to remember to keep it holy, by taking the day off from work to gather for worship. When we do this, we are worshiping the one true God of creation. Exodus 20 verse 8, remember the Sabbath day, To keep it holy, you are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Leviticus 23 verse 3, You have 6 days in which to do your work, but remember the seventh-day Sabbath. On that day do not work, but gather for worship. The Sabbath belongs to the Lord, no matter where you live. Acts 13 verse 44, On the next Sabbath almost the whole city came together to hear the word of God. There was even a time when Jesus gave a prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem, which was to take place 40 years after Jesus' resurrection, and he was still confirming the Sabbath. Matthew 24 verses 19 to 20, How terrible it will be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath. This means that neither Jesus, Paul, or the early church made any changes to the Sabbath day. The change was made by Satan because he hates it when people worship God through their obedience. Revelation 12 verse 17, This dragon was very angry with the woman. He went off to fight with the rest of her children. They are the ones who obey the laws of God and are faithful to the teachings of Jesus. This is what Satan did to change the Sabbath day from Saturday, the seventh day, to Sunday, the first day. He did it by changing a few words in the Bible to make it sound like the early church gathered on the first day, which is false. The early church never gathered on the first day because they followed Jesus. Jesus gathered every Sabbath, and so did Paul because Paul followed Jesus, which means the early believers gathered every Sabbath because both Jesus and Paul were their example. 1 John 2 verse 6, If we say that we remain in union with God, we should walk just as Jesus Christ walked. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, Paul said, Imitate me, just as I also imitate Christ. Now let's take this time to see what Satan did to deceive just about every mainline church in the world who keeps Sunday as the Lord's Day, of which the Bible says nothing about. There is not one verse in the entire Bible that says Sunday, or the first day of the week is the Lord's Day. But there are many that say the Sabbath is the Lord's Day. There are only a couple of verses that use the words, first day of the week, in comparison to the many that say the early church gathered every Sabbath. This is because the 4 words, day of the week, are not in the original language. During the days of Jesus, the people would use the seventh-day Sabbath to determine which week they were in any particular month, because each month had 4 Sabbaths. Let me give you an example. Luke 6 verse 1, Now it happened on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the grain fields. Did you notice how Luke said, on the second Sabbath after the first? That means Luke was referring to the second week of that particular month. If it was the third Sabbath, he would have said, the third Sabbath after the second. This is very important to see and understand, because the verses that say, the first day of the week, give the impression that it was Sunday, when it wasn't. They were actually saying, the first Sabbath, not the first day of the week. The 4 words, day of the week, is only one word in the original language, and it's the word, Sabbath. Let's look at one of the verses that is being used to support Sunday worship. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 2, On the first day of the week let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. The 4 words, day of the week, is the Strong's number G4521, and it's the word, Sabbaton, which is the seventh-day Sabbath, not Sunday. G4521, Sabbaton, the seventh day of each week, which was a sacred festival on which the Israelites were required to abstain from all work. The verse should actually read like this. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 2, On the first Sabbath let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. The word, Sabbath, is correct because when you read about Paul and the Corinthian church, it says he gathered every Sabbath with the church at Corinth. It also says he stayed teaching the Corinthian church for a year and 6 months, that's 78 Sabbath. The church at Corinth was a Sabbath-keeping church. Why did Paul say the first Sabbath? Because Paul was traveling to Jerusalem and would be passing through Corinth on the first Sabbath of that particular month. If he was passing through on the second Sabbath, he could have said it like it was said in Luke, on the second Sabbath after the first. The word first in 1 Corinthians 16 verse 2 is correct because Paul was pinpointing a specific time he would be passing through, but the word first can also be one or a certain one. This means the writer is not concerned about timing but rather that it was one of the Sabbaths or a certain Sabbath. For example, Acts 20 verse 7, on the first day of the week we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people and because he intended to leave the next day, kept on talking until midnight. Because Paul was not passing through on a particular day, he could have used the words first Sabbath, or one of the Sabbaths, or on a certain Sabbath when the disciples came together to break bread. When you read the context, Paul was about to leave the next day for his missionary journey, so he would not be seeing his brethren again. Because of this, he spoke all the way past midnight, even to the point that someone fell asleep and fell out a window and died. This was not a normal Sabbath fellowship. The verses could have been written like this. As you read Acts 20 verses 7 to 13 in context, I want you to picture in your mind Paul and the early church gathering on the Sabbath, and because Paul was leaving the next day, he spoke all night and then left the next day for his journey. The next day would have been Sunday. If Sunday was the new Sabbath, Paul would have not left on that day. Acts 20 verses 7 to 13, on the first Sabbath, we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people and because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking until midnight. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the third story and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "He's alive." Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, he left. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted. We went on ahead to the ship and sailed for Assos, where we were going to take Paul aboard. He had made this arrangement because he was going there on foot. There is no verse in the Bible that says the early church gathered on Sunday, the first day of the week. So why Sunday? Sunday worship is rooted in Babylonian sun worship, which is where most of Satan's religion is found. In Roman culture, Sunday was the day of the sun god. In paganism, the sun was a source of life, giving warmth and illumination to mankind. Sunday Wikipedia. Satan was able to get God's people to switch from Sabbath to Sunday because of another change he made to God's times, which was the resurrection. They say Jesus died on Good Friday and rose from the dead on Easter Sunday. That's why they changed the Sabbath to Sunday. First of all, Jesus didn't die on Good Friday and rise on Easter Sunday. Jesus was in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. Friday to Sunday is not 3 days and 3 nights, but that's a separate study. Secondly, even if he raised on Sunday, there is no authority in the Bible to move the Sabbath to Sunday because of it. Today's whole system of worship is rooted in Babylonian sun worship, which is why God's message to his people in these last days is to come out of Babylon. Revelation 18 verses 4 to 5, Then I heard another voice calling from heaven, "Come out of Babylon, my people. Do not take part in her sins, or you will be punished with her. For her sins are piled as high as heaven, and God remembers her evil deeds. Let us repent and come out of Babylon, and worship him who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." Revelation 14 verses 6 to 7, Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water." Have a blessed and happy Sabbath.